Apologies for absence from Councillor Fred Nichols and Councillor Alex Porter. There are no substitutes.
Thanks. The minutes of the last meeting, page 1 to 4. Can I agree those?
Agreed.
Everyone happy with those? Yeah. I'll take that as acclamation. Thank you. That's a copy there, isn't it? Item 3 is declarations of interests. Martin is going to read out a statement on that.
Thank you, Chairman. On behalf of Lisa Hastings, the Monitoring Officer, I just want to read out the guidance that's been given to members with regard to declarations of interest with regard to the local plan. It's a little long and I trust you'll bear with me, but we're very keen to ensure that everyone's aware of the advice that's been given and to include that advice in the minutes for this meeting. I believe it would be useful to provide members with guidance on declarations of interest in consideration of the publication draft local plan document, which is being considered by the Local Plan Committee on the 12th of June. The decision being sought at these meetings includes recommending, endorsing and approval of the publication draft local plan and sustainability appraisals for public consultation and submission to the government for examination in public. The majority of members could be regarded as having, as a matter of law, disclosable pecuniary interests due to land ownership within the Red Line settlement boundaries simply because they are residents of the district. Government has previously issued guidance that the legislation was not intended to cover such district-wide decisions. However, for the avoidance of doubt and members' protection, acting as the Council's monitoring officer, it is entirely reasonable that the criteria set out in Section 33A to E of the Localism Act 2011 apply, and for the land ownership simply within the Red Line settlement boundaries, a dispensation is granted to all members to debate and vote on the item. However, if you or your spouse or partner have land ownership, still a DPI, a declarable pecuniary interest, in any of the specific areas to be allocated, shown in various colours on the plans within the document, the above blanket dispensation does not apply. For specific land allocation, an individual dispensation would be required to remain in the room, take part in the debate and vote on the item, although it is unlikely that I would grant such a dispensation in the circumstances. If you're unclear or require further advice, then please refer to me or to Lisa. Failure to declare a DPI and take part in the decision is a criminal offence. Land within specific allocations which is owned by an external body or organisation may also fall within the definition of non-pecuniary interests if you were appointed or nominated to an outside body or an organisation by the council or are a member of an outside body which owns or controls land. A number of these organisations could meet the likely to affect test. The impact of having a non-pecuniary interest on participation at meetings is set out in the Council's Code of Conduct for members. The test is whether the councillor could reasonably regard it as having an interest so significant that it was likely to prejudice their judgment. As the decision is to approve a publication draft local plan, the monitoring officer's advice to councillors is that it is reasonable to conclude that this test would be met and that therefore councillors would not be able to remain and take part in the debate and vote after declaring the interest without a dispensation. By making the declaration of a non-pecuniary interest for land ownership, it will be assumed that the interest does prejudice your judgment and therefore you should not take part in the decision. Members may have declared interest at earlier meetings in the local plan process, including previous council meetings and at the local plan committee, and it's important to be seen to be consistent in the approach. So if members have ceased to hold an interest, they may wish to explain this. A declaration made previously cannot be assumed to be carried forward, and members must make all relevant declarations at the meetings they attend. Finally, for openness and transparency, this advice will be included within the minutes of this meeting. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Martin. So I'll kick off then by declaring that it's a non-pecuniary interest, but I state it just for transparency, really, that I am a director of the North Essex Garden Communities Limited, which I think is self-explanatory, and I'm a director then on behalf of the District Council. Carlo.
Yes, Chairman, I'd like to declare the same interest likewise as being an alternate director on the North Essex Garden Community, and also that I'm a director of the Lawford Housing and Development Trust, although there's no land allocated in the current plan as you stand. Nevertheless, I'd like to put on record that I'm a director of the Lawford Housing Enterprising Trust.
Ivan.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to declare an interest as a member of the Development and Regulation Committee on Essex County Council.
Chairman, can I add that as well?
Well done. Thanks, Ivan. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you very much for that. Next item is public speaking, pages 5 to 8. Now, I've got one question and I've got 4 statements. And the first question, or the question, is from Angela Barnes.
Good evening.
Hello.
Thank you for allowing this question. I'm Angela Barnes, a member of the Wheelie Residents Association. My question is, why is Horsley Cross still missing from localities listed for future development on the plan? If it was considered suitable to put forward for industrial use and then for the site of a future prison, why isn't it considered suitable for larger development, for instance, a garden village site? Please acknowledge that Wheelie is, and always has been, the bottleneck of the Tendring Peninsula, and for goodness sake start taking a sensible approach to road infrastructure and put any future large development onto the A120.
Thank you. I've got an answer for you, which is thank you for your question. Local plans are created balancing social, economic and environmental considerations. Horsley Cross is remote from services and from people. Horsley Cross has not formed part of this local plan because it is an unsustainable location for growth. As I'm sure you will be aware, the local plan follows the established settlement hierarchy. Horsley Cross is too small to feature within the settlement hierarchy, and placing large-scale growth there would be unviable and unsound. Thank you.
Right. I think a lot of people disagree with that, but they...
Thanks. I've got 3 statements from Carol Bannister, which are on A1, A2 and A3. Carol, you can give them consecutively, please. When you're ready.
I'm speaking to express my concern and objection to the last paragraph to be found in the Resources and Risks section of the Executive Summary of item A1. It says, if the Council is unable to demonstrate that the sites proposed for the local plan can reasonably deliver objectively assessed housing requirement in full, with the necessary buffers, there may be a need to reconsider the option of major development of Wheelie. I was under the impression that the Council had eventually accepted that massive large-scale development in the small village of Wheelie, the smallest of the rural service centres, would not only be unfair, inappropriate and disproportionate, thus contravening national planning policies, but would also create havoc and mayhem for the nearby villages, particularly Thorpe-le-Soken and Tendring. To decimate the rural character and identity of our village to such an unacceptable level, and to ignore the inevitability of serious traffic congestion and the possibility of increased flooding, unresolvable sewerage issues, of which there are ongoing ones already, is not only foolhardy but potentially dangerous, and demonstrates a total lack of respect for our small community. The Wheelie Residents Action Group is horrified that the possibility of future large-scale development of Wheelie has just been slipped in again in this way, and call for the entire district to be re-examined if at any time problems emerge regarding the deliverability of other sites included in the plan. Now, my comment for item A2, location plan evidence update. Now, as a resident of Wheelie, I cannot agree with the Council's reason for selecting the land south of Thorpe Road for large-scale development as set out in Appendix 2. The road and rail links are not good, as one often experiences within a rural area, and that's precisely why many of us live here. We value our rural agricultural landscape, and there's no way that the surrounding lanes and B roads could be adapted to make walking and cycling safe for regular use by the general public, as required by the NPPF. This particular land is valued by locals, especially for the history attached to it, going back as far as Napoleonic times, and for its position as part of the backdrop to the listed unique St Andrew's Church in the Fields. Furthermore, there's not a local need for this number of properties, and it would represent an increase of almost 60% on the housing stock in the village, both disproportionate and unfair. However, when questioned, the vast majority of residents agreed that if an increase of approximately 300 properties was inevitable over the planned period, they would favour the car boot field, which is land on the outskirts of the village that has not been used for agricultural purpose for many years. In fact, the NPPF requires that previously used land should take precedence over agricultural land. Wheelie may be in the centre of the Tendring Peninsula, but it's on the slow rail line. There are no plans for that situation to change, and trains do not even run on Sundays. Moreover, due to the current serious problem, which has been occurring in front of the station entrance since April, and I think some of the committee are not aware of this, there's no guarantee that it will actually remain open for much longer. The enormous black monstrosity recently erected on land that's been used for many decades by members of the public as a small station turning and parking area now contains a huge number of old vehicles and displays a no parking warning sign. Network Rail advertises that passenger safety is of prime importance, but at the present time the safety of users of Wheelie Station is being compromised. I have actually issued an official complaint to Network Rail that's still ongoing regarding the fact that this organisation recently sold off the land for £37,000 to a third party. I've got the land registry details to support that fact and have contacted the council regarding this matter, but I haven't received a reply. This committee needs to establish exactly what is happening at the station before making any decisions about Wheelie. Item 3, A3, Publication Draft Local Plan. Now, the proposed policy, SAMU5, for development south of Thorpe Road, Wheelie, presents a number of problems for the residents of this small village, including paragraph A, which suddenly introduces the words at least. At least 280 could cover an extremely wide range, and the use of these two words is totally unacceptable. It appears that a housing estate of unknown size is being planned. The land is in fact being proposed by a developer who has got some connections with the council and has built in the area for years. Now, paragraph I is about provision of a pedestrian cycle bridge over the railway line, something we've never heard about before. And it confirms that the council intends totally urbanising the area, and the magnificent rural backdrop to the listed St Andrew's Church will be lost forever. Yet there's a far more suitable and considerably less intrusive site on previously used land, a relatively short distance away in Colchester Road. Paragraph J concerns the delivery of opportunities for the protection and enhancement of the historic environment. There's only one word to describe these proposals. The council is planning to destroy Wheelie's historic rural environment, to destroy Wheelie as we know it. Finally, although the timetable in Chapter 5 tells us that development in Wheelie will not start until 2023, elsewhere in the many supporting documents, we are told that were the developer to apply and receive permission prior to the final adoption of the local plan, work could start considerably earlier. So the uncertainty for Wheelie continues, and we could be living in a building site for the rest of our lives. That is so unfair. Thank you.
Next up is, on A3, is Sue Jiggins.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? No. What we don't understand is how we've got from the position on the 3rd of November, I quote, The committee, having considered all of the information provided, it was moved by Councillor Stock and seconded by Councillor Turner, and unanimously resolved that the committee agrees that the Head of Planning Services will be authorised to proceed with option T, 307 new homes, and not option W, in respect of allocations in Wheelie, and that Wheelie is redesignated as a rural service settlement. How do we get from there to where we are now? Peterborough Associates' initial advice was 550 new homes per year, but you jumped in with an uplift of 600, resulting in your arbitrary plan to dump the potential shortfall of around 1,100 new homes in Wheelie. Without sound planning justification for this and many potential alternatives, your sustainability appraisal criteria has persisted in exaggerating the true sustainability of Wheelie. It's not objective and it is flawed. There were and are alternatives that are far more sustainable across the range of criteria: roads, trains, buses, shops, GP practices and so on. Your manipulated facts were demonstrated to be inaccurate, flawed and just plain wrong. PBA came back again, reconfirming their original figure of 550. On the 3rd of November, dressed up as being as a result of our campaign, but in reality the result of this second confirmation from PBA, Councillor Stock, with apparent delight, congratulated us on our campaign and promised that Wheelie's housing figure would return to 307 and that Wheelie's designation would revert to that of a rural service settlement. It's in the minutes. Now suddenly, out of nowhere, on the back of an envelope perhaps, or maybe the landowner developer council alliance...
Sorry, can I just stop you there? What are you trying to suggest there? On the back of an envelope? What are you saying?
What I'm saying is it's fairly common when organisations suddenly produce things that nobody understands that the expression back of an envelope is used. Can I continue? Everything previously mooted, discussed, argued, agreed and published has changed. Wheelie is again at the forefront of carrying the burden of the Council's inability to plan appropriately. We've watched the machinations of this Council with increasing alarm, but this latest final incarnation beggars belief. The configurations at Wheelie changed every time you came up with a new idea. Baconfield, Hawk Farm, Crow Lane, Ash Farm, in one minute, out the next, and now this. At least 280 new homes, public open space, land for development, a new primary school and early years provision, on a plot easily capable of accommodating 500 new homes. Interestingly, and maybe coincidentally, the critical mass for provision of a school is 500 new homes. I think it's clear that at least could well be 500. And, of course, the potential redesignation, again, to something or other, so that if you fail to deliver in other locations, it's back to Wheelie as your problem solved. And, of course, the footbridge at a cost of around £1 million, the beautiful rural landscape with views of our historic church that is enjoyed by the people who currently use the crossing will become a housing estate. I think that it's the 11th hour, it's time that it all became clear. I know that I'm wasting my breath. We know that whatever we say will be ignored. We can only hope now that the planning inspector will, as the recent election results have shown is possible, see through all this hype and find this local plan unsound. Thank you.
Yeah. I really don't understand what you're on about. Nothing's changed since we made that decision. Never mind. We'll move on. Go on, Joanne. Is it? Is it? I can hear it, right? Are your microphones working?
No, it's like an echo. Like We've had it before.
It's not the microphones, it's the volume.
Okay. But the speech comes out of the microphone, so that needs to work as well. Okay, well, moving on then to item 5 on page 9 of your agendas is housing supply position, housing trajectory, and I think Gary's going to take that one. Over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, councillors. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's good to be back with you tonight. The purpose of this report is to report on 3 things related to housing figures. Firstly, the number of houses that were actually completed in tendering in the last financial year, 2016-17. Secondly, what the current housing land supply position is, because councils have to be able to demonstrate a 5-year supply of deliverable housing sites, and I can give you an update on where we are with that. And the third element of this report is the trajectory of expected or anticipated housing completions over the full plan period up to 2033. And again, that is a requirement of national planning policy to have that information to underpin your local plan. So taking the first item, the number of completions, and this is the number of net completions, so this takes account of any dwellings that were demolished or converted within that time, for 2016-17 was 658. That is a significant increase on very recent levels of housing development, and that really reflects the number of sites that have gained planning permission. It reflects an improvement in housing market conditions, and it's the highest number of dwelling completions in any year since the 1990s. So a real marked improvement in housing completions. And that has a positive impact on where the district is in terms of its 5-year housing supply requirement, which is the next item within the report. Government requires that councils must be able to identify a 5-year supply of deliverable housing sites. If they can't do that, then they are vulnerable to speculative planning applications for housing, and we have seen over the last couple of years a number of those schemes that have got through the council on appeal because for some time now we haven't been in a position where we can identify a 5-year supply. I'm very pleased to present to you the updated figures which demonstrate that we do now have a 5-year supply. In fact, it's a 5.1-year supply. The relevant table with the figures are on page 19 of your agendas. And I won't run through the calculations in great detail, but to say that in the grey section at the top part of this table sets out the number of homes that are needed over the next 5 years to meet that requirement, which is 4,291. Then within the white sections of your tables, you'll see that we have sites with planning permission, the large site commitments, expecting to deliver about 3,600 homes, and then small sites in the district expected to deliver around 770 homes, and that reflects a real boost in the number of smaller sites that have gained planning permission for housing over the last couple of years. The total is 4,395. That exceeds our 5-year requirement, and therefore we can demonstrate a 5.1-year supply of housing. And the relevance of this is already being tested because we've recently had planning appeals where in the past we weren't able to argue a 5-year supply, but now we can. And there was an appeal a couple of weeks ago for land at Centenary Way, Little Clacton, where for the first time we actually said, no, we do have a 5-year supply now, and inviting the inspector to dismiss the appeal. And we hope that that is the result that we get when that comes through in a couple of weeks' time. The third item within your report is the trajectory of housing completions forecast for every year in the period up to 2033. Now, this includes within it our estimates of how many houses per year are likely to be completed on sites, A, that have already gained planning permission, B, small what we call windfall sites, sites of 9 or fewer dwellings that are likely to deliver over that period of time. And in the trajectory for the local plan, we also include our forecast of how many dwellings will be completed on the sites that are proposed for inclusion in the local plan that is before you tonight. And if you turn to page 21 of your agenda, you will see the product of those calculations, which is the annual housing trajectory for the period up to 2033. In blue, the 4 columns on the blue indicate years that have passed and the completions within those years. As you see, the first 3 years we were bumbling around at the 200 to 300 mark. But in this last year, we've seen a significant increase in delivery, 658. Now, the trajectory would suggest that we will continue to see some significant annual housing growth, particularly in 2017-18, 18-19 and 19-20. And really, that is a result of a lot of sites that have gained planning permission in the last year or two, delivering new homes all at the same time across the district. So a number of medium to large size sites all delivering housing. Then you'll see that there's a bump in the figures around about 2021, 22, and that's really because the development on those sites currently with permission will begin to dry up because those sites will be completed. But then from 2023 onwards, the large new sites that are allocated in the local plan before you tonight should, if our forecasts are correct, start delivering housing numbers on a larger scale again. And then you see the figures going up to around the 900 mark. And then from 2026 onwards, towards the end of the plan period, we see a real stable supply of housing in the sort of 400 to 500s as the larger sites really take over. They begin to deliver a constant stream of housing delivery, and also the garden community for Colchester begins to deliver a consistent stream of housing delivery. You haven't got so many of these sites all dotted around the district at that stage delivering housing. If you turn to page 22, members, you will see how the trajectory actually matches up with what the housing requirement for the local plan is. And in the table on that page, you'll see the requirement of 11,000 homes over a 20-year period, which is what you get if you times 550 by 20. And if you take off the completions that we've already had to date, sorry, there's a typo there, completions 2013 to 2017, the requirement comes down to around 9,600, and that's what the local plan needs to identify land to deliver. Already around 5,000 of those, 4,700, are expected on the sites that have planning permission. Small sites over the longer period are expected to deliver around 1,400 homes. So that leaves local plan allocations that are in the plan before you tonight delivering about £4,500. £4,500, a bit more than that from 4,400 homes. So in total exceeding the requirement there by around 1,000, which indicates that we should be very robust when this plan is examined in front of the inspector, because not only have we identified enough land to meet the requirement, we can exceed it as well. If I turn you now to page 27 of your agenda, here is the raw data, for want of a better word, that sits behind the trajectory for the local plan. And within that, there is a list there of all of the sites of 10 or more homes that have planning permission, or planning permission subject to a Section 106 agreement, and all of the sites that are allocated in the local plan that is before you tonight. And for each of the years between now and 2033, it provides a forecast based upon our best knowledge of these developments and our best knowledge of the housing market in each of the individual areas as to how many properties we would expect to be built in each of those years. In the green are those properties that we expect to be built in the next 5 years, and they have been translated into our 5-year calculation. And in the yellow colour are what we expect to be delivered after the next 5 years, and these are what will contribute towards long-term supply. You will see for some of the sites they actually straddle both periods. So, for example, the very first one at Thorpe Road, although that site has planning permission for 250, we expect that it will take a very long time for that to deliver in full. Some of those will be within the first 5 years, but a lot of them will also be within the 10 years after that. Over to page 29. At the very end, the penultimate row is the expected number of homes to be delivered on the smaller sites across the district, and this is based on a forecast based on how many houses have been delivered on smaller sites in the past, combined with how many sites we know actually have planning permission for smaller developments within the district. And there is also then a trajectory for each of the years of how many, roughly, it will never be exactly that number, you can't be that accurate, but roughly how many we would expect. And then at the very end are the total figures that then translate down into the graph at the bottom of that page. Pages 31 and 32 set out the methodology for working out what the windfall requirement is. So if I take you to the recommendation within the report, which starts on page 9 and passes over to page 10, the recommendation is that the Local Plan Committee notes the net dwelling stock increase of 658 for tendering recorded for the period 1st of April 2016 to 31st of March 2017, and the achievement of a 5-year housing supply at 31st of March 2017. And secondly, that the committee endorses the content of this report as evidence to demonstrate that the housing supply trajectory and aid the examination. What's this? To demonstrate the housing supply trajectory and aid the examination for the publication draft local plan. We might want to look at a slight revision to that wording, I think, before we ask members to agree that. And B, to demonstrate an up-to-date 5.1-year housing supply at the end of May 2017 for the purposes of determining planning applications, which will be kept under review and updated as necessary to reflect latest information and intelligence. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Gary. Nick, and then I'll come to you, Jeff.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very happy to move that, Mr. Chairman, and to thank the Office for doing a superb case. And what a pleasure it is to get over a finishing line.
Just you're moving it.
I'm moving it
with the,
as read.
Yeah, but with the word "of" removed and 2A.
Yeah, so I didn't catch that.
Yeah, so it reads to demonstrate the housing supply trajectory and aid the examination
of.
I cut the wrong one out. Sorry. Delete 4. To demonstrate the housing supply trajectory and aid the examination of the publication draft local plan. It had of
yes,
and for.
Correct.
Yeah, sorry. You seconding it? Yeah, Jeff. You right? Go on then.
Oh, sorry, Jeff.
Am I on? Yeah. Thanks, Chair. I just want to go back very quickly to the 5-year housing supply, which has turned out to be such an important issue. As myself and Councillor Everett, my colleague, were so involved in it, real pain in the neck, I think we were described as by some. But we got there. I'd like to ask if we can be sure that we can maintain that into the future. It is an important element, and I'm happy to be a royal pain in the neck again. But can we just confirm that we can please maintain that, or we believe we can maintain that?
Gary.
Thank you. If I take you to the trajectory figures, which start on page 27, you will see that some of the completions are in the green colour, and they are the ones that we expect in the 5 years. Now, for some of the larger sites, they will extend beyond the 5 years. So even after the 5 years, they will be contributing towards supply. But what we will need to do in the future, we can't stop approving planning permission for schemes just because we have a 5.1 year supply now. What we need to do is to continue to approve applications. But whereas before we were being put under pressure to approve applications that didn't feature within the local plan and that were presented to us as departures from the local plan, if we continue now to consider applications but in line with our new local plan, that we're looking at tonight and approve those applications for those sites through the planning process, then we can maintain an ongoing 5-year supply. It's if we completely pull up the drawbridge and stop approving stuff, that's when we could get into trouble. But you have here a document containing site allocations, which provide an indication of which sites could be approved planning permission in the future.
So hang on a second, Joy. Just hang on a second. Jeff, did you second it? Yeah. So just to be clear. Okay, Joy.
Oh, so I just wondered if now would be a good time to say thank you to Councillor Everett for noticing this at the various appeals and bringing it to the Council's attention. Thanks.
You can't say that.
You said that, you can say that. Go on, Carly.
I strongly refute that, Chairman. I think it was clearly demonstrated by officers that through their own extreme hard work in which they've dealt with a barrage of applications that has given us the very fortuitous position to be in of demonstrating 5-year land supply, has been purely and simply through the officers' work in the way they've dealt with this influx of application, not from the challenge of any members of this council. Let's make that absolutely clear, Chairman.
Okay. Joy.
I am not denying the hard work of the officers, Carlo, but you will have to remember that this is what Councillor Everett brought to the attention of the council. Whether that was already in the pipeline or not, he brought it to our attention. That's all I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to undermine what the officers have done. I know how hard they've worked. Thanks.
Ivan.
Just a brief mention, taking into consideration some of the comments were made by people earlier, the members of the public earlier, about infrastructure and transport availability and need within the whole number of this expansion of housing. Are we either now or later on in this going to explain that that will be taken into account by the inspector when he finally looks at that, to make sure that that infrastructure, the railway the rail availability, the public transport availability are meet those commitments that we're which goes alongside these housing developments?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Henderson. Yes, indeed. Members of this committee, this 18th meeting of this committee, have continuously received updates on the evidence base, and that has now completed alongside the local plan itself, and right the way through, whether it's water resources, whether it's transport, highways, education, the whole elements that relate to an infrastructure delivery plan, which is again published on the website. You've got links to it. It's out there. And to be tested through the local plan examination when it comes next year.
Okay, thanks. Right, it's been moved and seconded on page, as printed on page 9 and 10, with that slight removal of the word of. We're happy to agree it? Agreed. Thank you. Next item is
Page 79.
Page 79? Page 33, isn't it? Page 33. A2, local plan evidence update. Simon? You're taking that one. Okay. Thank you, Kath.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to provide members with an update on the progress of the evidence that's necessary to support the local plan. This report, the format of this report, has been a regular feature at recent local plan committees, and we've provided a table that sets out all of the various pieces of evidence that have been commissioned, where those studies are, and some of the highlights that have come forward from those studies. So the format should be familiar to members, and if you turn to page 35, there's the regular table with the list of studies. It's actually been slightly updated since publication of this agenda by the update that you would have received last Friday and is also in front of you tonight. So on the front sheet of the update you have this evening, you'll notice the first item talks about the draft viability report being received and also the Open Spaces Sport and Recreation report being received. And later on I will talk about how that's impacted on the policies within the plan. Appendix A to the report that you're looking at, so that starts on page 39, sets out a summary of each of the pieces of evidence that are named within that table. Some of them relate solely to section 1 of the local plan, so that's the joint part of the plan with Colchester and Braintree, and other elements are purely tendering focused. So in terms of the section 1 information, there's been a viability appraisal which has shown that all 3 of the garden communities can be viable. There's work being done on the habitats regulations assessments and also the sustainability appraisal for part 1, and those highlight impacts from the policies and the proposals within the plan, and also about how those are being mitigated through the development of the plan. So it's an iterative process from the preferred options we had last summer through to the version that's before you tonight. Within section 2, there's various more detailed studies about tendering only, including transport modelling. It talks about the impacts of development that's proposed and how those impacts might be mitigated. We've had habitats regulation assessments completed. A local plan viability has been received in draft for part 2 for section 2, the tendering element, and also sustainability appraisal for section 2. Overall, the sustainability appraisal does identify some positive impacts of the plan overall and its policies and the allocations within it, although there are some areas of uncertainty, and the report makes recommendations about how those could be mitigated in the future. That might be about the way developments are phased, about the detail of the layout, so those sort of more detailed site-specific elements. So, Chairman, if I take you to the recommendations for this report, that's on page 33. It is that this committee notes the latest progress on the evidence base to justify the content of the local plan.
Nick?
Yeah. Very happy again to propose this, Mr. Chairman. It's very interesting. I disagree with some of the reports, but then I wouldn't I? But it's not worth slightest of difference at this level, so we can argue that later on when we've gone it through. Excellent. And using it.
Thanks, Nick. So it's been moved. Carlo?
Happy to second that, Chairman.
So it's for noting. Are we happy to note it?
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed? Noted. Thank you, everyone. Sorry, Mark.
Sorry, just looking at the evidence, Chair. The transport modelling phase 3, have we actually seen that?
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. It's on the website, yeah.
It's on the website.
It's on sorry.
It's because that one's on.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Stevenson, it's on our website. It's one of the links we sent through last week.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it says in the report about climatic factors. Are we taking into account the future government policy and strategy on air quality within these areas? Because we do understand that the government's publishing proposals.
Yeah, it does pick up the issue of air quality, particularly in relation to Clacton, because of the relatively large potential developments, but it does talk about those probably being able to be mitigated by layout, the amount of open space within them, so those detailed issues about how the sites come forward. So it hasn't said they will necessarily have a negative impact. It's more about that iterative process, about taking into account those possible impacts in terms of the more detailed work.
Okay. Right, well, we agreed that one, so I'll move on to the next item, which is page 79, A3. Cass this year?
This is me, yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Before I start the presentation formally, I'd just like to substitute the update sheet that you have in front of you for another, because some of you may have spotted that the ones that have been copied for you are single-sided, which means that you're missing the half of the information that should be in front of you. So we have a complete version for you.
Yep. Okay.
That's where Simon disappeared to. Someone spotted it.
It's fine.
It's interesting. See, when you we've built 5 hectares in New England. We've created, right?
Yeah.
That's not even mentioned because you can't agree it because it's a recreational open space, which it is. But because you live in the middle of a bloody town, you don't have a beach. It's not recognised. It's nonsense. That's just one bit. 1 million plus, 1.5 million people come down to our beaches, but we're short of space according to the report.
Me to make a start then.
Go for it.
Thank you, Chair. Right, I think all of our members have got the updated information now. So it's just a slight variation on the information that was sent to you last Friday. Okay, so we're looking at item A3 now. The purpose of this particular report is to provide an opportunity for the committee to review those parts of the publication draft of the local plan that were not considered at the local plan committee meeting on the 20th of April. Following the preferred options consultation, which was last year, the next stage of plan preparation is to consult on the publication version of the plan. That used to be known as the pre-submission version. Sustainability appraisals, which assess the likely significant environmental implications of policies and site allocations and consider reasonable alternatives, have also been carried out for both sections of the publication draft local plan. So Section 1, the joint part, and Section 2, the tendering only element. Appended to this report are a number of appendices. So the first one, Appendix A, contains the full text and mapping with revisions made to Section 1 and also the relevant Section 2 chapters following the preferred options consultation. So those are the chapters that you haven't seen before. Appendix B provides a table of reasons for those changes set against the comments that have been made. Appendix C contains the sustainability appraisals for Section 1 and 2, and those are the large volumes that followed the main reports in the agenda. Appendix D is a legal opinion regarding an aspect of the sustainability appraisal in particular, and Appendix E lists the consultation drop-in events that we've planned. Chair, I would now like to take you to the recommendations. Do you have a copy of the amendments for me? Yeah. Okay. Are they on the update sheet? I think Neil's got. That's for Martin. Yeah, but I have all the notes. Okay. You should have a sheet with amended recommendations for tonight's meeting. Just checking that you can find that. It's just an A4 sheet headed Local Plan Committee, 12th of June, amended recommendations. Yep, everybody got that? Okay. Lovely. The recommendations... Councillor Beaver's trying to get your attention.
What?
So I'll explain.
Go on, you can explain, Kath.
Okay, if I just carry on, so I'll explain the content of it. The essence of the recommendations doesn't change. The only reason that the recommendations have been altered slightly is simply to reflect the updates to the evidence base that I ran through for the last report. So at the moment, the published agenda said recommended that the plan is endorsed as seen in the Appendix A. But now we're recommending some slight changes to that to reflect the new evidence. Okay, so it doesn't change the essence of the recommendations, it's just to reflect those updates. I'm going to read through each of them in turn and explain what each of the changes. To help, but if you can't hear me, do shout. Okay, so the first recommendation is that the committee, 1A, endorses the content of Section 1 of the Council's publication draft local plan. Okay. Sorry. Yeah, that's fine. Just double checking I am getting the correct version for you, councillors. So the local plan, as I've already explained, does comprise two sections. Section 1 and the revisions to it, since the preferred options consultation, have been jointly prepared with Braintree District and Colchester Borough Council and deal with strategic issues. So there are no changes arising to that section as a result of our updates to the evidence. So that first recommendation stays exactly as it is. Braintree District Council and Colchester Borough Council will also consider Section 1 for their respective local plans at meetings in May and June. In fact, Colchester Borough Council are meeting this evening with their local plan committee meeting, and Braintree have already met. Consultation in each authority is programmed to start imminently and ends on the 28th of July. The second recommendation is that the committee, so this is 1B, endorses the remaining chapters of Section 2 of the Council's publication draft local plan as set out in Appendix A, as amended by the update sheet which was circulated to members on Friday the 9th of June and tabled at this meeting, and including a full set of local maps. So the change there is just to reflect the update sheet. So the chapters that were not considered on the 20th of April but are being considered tonight are the introduction, the Living Places chapter, which is about housing supply, layout, etc., Prosperous Places, which is about retailing, town centres and employment, Delivering Places, delivering infrastructure, and the Monitoring Review section, but also the policies maps and the local inset maps. This new version of the local plan takes account of the preferred options consultation, and officers have worked with objectors to try and reduce the number of objections through alterations to the text. These changes are presented to committee to consider and can be seen in Appendix A. The amendments listed on the update sheet are mainly as a result of the Council receiving a completed open space sport and recreation study and also the draft viability study. In addition, a correction is made to the Clacton-on-Sea and Jaywick Sands local inset map to achieve consistency with the map for the Rouse's Farm policy, which leaves a gap between Jaywick Sands and Clacton, and this is in line with the findings of the Rush Green Road appeal decision. So in the version that was sent out to you, the printed agenda, the local policy map showed the retention of a gap between Jaywick and Clacton. But the inset map for Clacton didn't show that gap. It appeared that all of the land was within one of the allocations. So the amendment is to make those consistent and ensure that a gap is left between the two settlements, as was recommended by the inspector. And the amended recommendation also clarifies that the preferred options local plan that the local plan committee is being asked to endorse includes a full set of local inset maps, not just those that are recommended for amendment as published in the agenda, and a link to the full set was circulated to you last week. So the papers in front of you, we've included all those plans where there are amendments. We've set next to each other the previous version and the version that's now proposed, but it doesn't include the plans that won't change from the preferred options. And those are ones obviously that you've approved previously. But the publication version of the plan must include the full set. Okay, the next recommendations, that's 1C, is that the committee endorses the amendments to those chapters of section 2 of the Council's publication draft local plan already endorsed by members at their meeting on the 20th April, as set out in the update sheet, which was circulated to members on Friday the 9th. So the things you've already approved, but slightly amended to take account of that new evidence. Most of those impact on the sustainable places, protected places and healthy places chapters. Not surprisingly, because it's come out of the open space study. Okay, recommendation number 2 is that the committee endorses the sustainability appraisals prepared by Place Services as attached and summarised at Appendix C. So the councils are required to undertake sustainability appraisals and strategic environmental assessments of local plans to identify potentially significant environmental effects created as a result of the implementation of that plan. This could include impacts on biodiversity, population, fauna, flora, etc. And an integrated approach can be taken to satisfying both of those requirements. And so the sustainability appraisal that forms part of the agenda tonight covers both of those requirements. The effects of the plan are found to be largely positive, but with some uncertainty in relation to proposed garden communities, and an alternative to the garden communities known as Metro Town has also been assessed and was found to perform badly against some of the criteria. In addition, the land for that alternative wasn't identified in the call for sites process and is in fragmented ownership. Recommendation number 3 is that the committee refers section 1 of the remaining chapters of the Tendring District Local Plan publication draft, together with its decision on the 20th of April 2017, as amended by the update sheet, which was circulated to members on Friday the 9th and tabled at this meeting, to Cabinet as a complete document for consultation. So those papers for Cabinet have already been published with a complete version of the document, but will need to just be updated to reflect that most recent evidence. And we've got an amended recommendation for Cabinet to pick up that point. Cabinet meets tomorrow, and we will obviously provide an update of the outcome of this meeting for Cabinet when they meet in the morning. The 4th recommendation is that the committee delegates authority to the head of planning in consultation with the chairman of the local plan committee to make minor administrative corrections and changes to the publication draft local plan. So that's to allow for typos, for grammatical errors to be rectified. It's not to allow for any policy changes. The 5th recommendation is that the content of the Tendring District Council publication draft local plan and sustainability appraisals be approved. The 5th recommendation is that you recommend to Council The 5th recommendation is that this committee recommends to Council that the content of the plan and sustainability appraisals be approved.
This is this one.
Thank you. 6, that a 6-week public consultation and engagement process on the Tendring District Council publication, draft local plan and sustainability appraisals be undertaken. So this consultation will seek the views of statutory bodies, local people and other interested parties on the soundness of the publication draft local plan, the sustainability appraisal and also whether the Council has met the duty to cooperate in its preparation. The 7th recommendation is that following the said consultation and engagement, the publication, draft local plan and sustainability appraisals, along with the representations received during the public consultation, be submitted to the Government Secretary of State to appoint a planning inspector to hold an examination in public. So submission of the plan to Government allows an examination in public to be organised, and the inspector who's appointed will consider the plan that we submit, the the representations made during the consultation and any further evidence gathered by the Council in the intervening period in deciding which topics will be discussed at the examination and who will have a seat at that table. A joint examination with Braintree and Colchester will be held in relation to Section 1 of the plan, and separate examinations will be held for each of the three councils in respect of their Section 2s. And the final recommendation is that Tendring District Council requests the Planning Inspector to make recommended changes to the publication draft local plan to make it sound. So we're asking for feedback from the Inspector about how to make it sound if he finds there are any elements of it that aren't sound. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, right, so that's quite a comprehensive explanation of the recommendations, the amended recommendations that have been circulated, that everyone has got a copy of on their chairs, including the updates, and I will just say at this point, further to what Joyce said about Councillor Everett, that I am grateful to Councillor Everett for his tenacious approach to the local plan, particularly in regards to to an email he sent me recently where he had identified some of these updates, so well done, Richard. And they've been taken on board in this update list. So it is a bit of a movable feast. I apologise to everyone that it's a bit sort of scruffy having lots of bits of paper and lots of last-minute updates, but that is, I'm afraid, the nature of the beast. The important thing is that after many years of this committee, or certainly many, many months and a few years of this committee meeting, we have before us the end goal tonight. We've got the local plan. It's the thing we've all been trying to get in place. We've all had our different views on it. We've had tweaks and changes along the way, but I think we've come to the conclusion strongly that we do need a local plan in place as quickly as possible, and this is now the step we're taking towards achieving that. So I'm happy to move the recommendation that Kath has just read out. Nick?
I can only endorse what you said, Chairman, and it'll give me great pleasure in seconding it. And do remember, this is a living document. So it can be tweaked and changed in the future as and when the demands of our district demand.
Indeed, and this committee will live on beyond today.
Good.
Regardless of what happens. So it's been moved and it's been seconded. Any questions, comments from anyone? Because we've probably all had our say on this 1,000 times. Jeff?
Thank you. I'll make it 1,001. Sorry. As probably one of the most outspoken members of the committee, and I have been, and again, I was a real pain in the neck there as well. I do remember back to the first meeting I had here back in July 2015 as part of this committee. What we have here today is not perfect. No one's going to describe it as that. But it's a heck of a move forward from where we were. And I think the committee should take a deal of congratulations for that, all of them. Much has been done. We cannot possibly please all of the people with this. Whatever we do with a local plan, some people will be less than happy. But I'm encouraged by Councillor Turner's comments. It's a living document. It can be tweaked and changed when necessary, and I have absolutely no doubt that it will need to be at some point in the future. But for tonight, let's crack on.
Thank you for that, Jeff, and I'd certainly endorse your comments. This has been a lot of hard work by officers, obviously, by members of the public who've come and addressed us, but by members of this committee who have drafted, who've read through some really intense, complicated documents. Members present and past. You know, we're a council that I've literally lost count of how many political groups we've got. I think it's 8 at the moment, but I won't even ask Ian to answer that one. We've got lots of different opinions on this council. We've had lots of different ideas in respect to this local plan, and we've discussed them all and debated them all in a surprisingly civilised manner, I think, and we've come today to this conclusion. So members, without further ado, can I have a show of hands? Did you want to speak, Mark? Go on then, before I take the vote.
That's all right. I just wanted to make basically a statement and comment, really. That whilst I don't agree with everything in the local plan, I have issues with the transport policies in it. I have been watching the appeal decisions coming through, and I just wanted to read an extract from the latest one that was at 1. And it claims to support its position, the Council would refer to its emergency policy LP11, which requires one blah, blah, blah. However, this policy is not at an advanced stage, and it's talking about the local plan we have in front of us now, and cannot be afforded more than limited weight. This is because it's subject to amendments and has not been examined. As such, the requirements of the emerging policy are not a sound basis upon which a refusal of planning permission can be sustained. Now, what I'm trying to say here is, whilst its document is exactly as it is now, it's worthless, really. And our biggest opposition, really, is not the other colours of the parties here, but it will be landowners and developers who haven't made it into the local plan. And so whilst I don't agree with everything in this local plan, I'm happy to endorse it and recommend the recommendations that the officers have put forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. But I would just make the point that by the end of this week, when and if it has gone through full council, particularly if it's gone through full council with the overwhelming support of the vast majority of members, not just on a really narrow win, then it will start to gain weight, and it goes, because it's then beyond the remit of any councillor to amend or change it. It's gone off to a final consultation, and then those responses go to the inspector, the public examination, and now we start to have a local plan that does have teeth, basically. Carlo, did you want to?
Yes, Chairman, I just would like to talk about the members' briefing that was organised on the local plan a few weeks back, where there was, I think, the record attendance of members, and I did ask the very question, do we have any developers that are likely to challenge what's in this document? And I was very pleased to hear that the answer was no. I think there would be someone who would challenge, but not any expectation of any really violent and robust challenge. So I really do feel that what we've put forward there, with a huge amount of give and take and compromise and whatnot, it's a really, really incredibly good product. Let's not forget that, again, I've repeated this time and time again, the project that we are involved with as the garden community, it's groundbreaking stuff. There's no one else in the country that are involved in such projects at the moment. And that's because of that we've been able to renumber all our other sites. Let's be frank with this. If the Garden City project wasn't there, the fact that Wheelie had been deleted, rest assured that it would have been not. So therefore we must all, like we have done, support the Garden City community project, because that is the way of what future planning should be, to put all the infrastructure, health provision and schools, education and roads in first, and then worry about the residential element. So I do commend this plan, Chairman, and I'm very, very pleased to be part of the making of it.
Okay. Joy, go on.
I know there is absolutely nothing our officers or any of us can do about this, but one of the biggest concerns of everybody that I speak to is all these housing, all they see is a total number. What are we going to do about doctors? The NHS, it's just in meltdown, I think. I don't know what they're going to do, but all this housing and people got nowhere to go to the doctor. That's what I'm getting. But anyway, I know there's nothing that our officers can do or the council can do, but
no, we need a general election, probably. We need a general election to sort that out, don't we? Jeff, go on.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. Just a very quick question. I just passed this to Gary, which makes perfect sense to me. Given we have an increase in completions, and given that we have a 20% uplift on our overall number because we didn't make our completion targets in the past, at what point do we no longer need that 20% uplift on our overall figure?
Who knows the answer to that? Gary does.
No, that makes perfect sense. The reason why the council has to apply a 20% buffer to its figures is because it's had a consistent record of under-delivery. We've got 1 year of a success. I would say once we're in, I believe that the standard, you want really an economic cycle of continual achievement. I'd say 5 years worth of success, and then you can reduce it to a 5-year buffer at that point.
A little bit.
So just to clarify then, if for the next 5 years we maintain our 550 plus, then we can remove the 20% buffer the next time, because in 5 years we'll review this, so that will be useful to know. That's roughly right.
For the purposes of the 5-year housing supply calculation, yes, whereas at the moment you have to effectively identify 6 years because it's 5 years plus 20%. In the future, that should be less onerous because it will be 5 years plus a smaller 5% buffer.
Excellent. Thank you. I'll be quiet now.
Yeah, good news, good news. Right, members of the committee, can you all... Do you want to say something or not? Go on.
I was just going to make the point, and Carlo said it. It got a huge opportunity, actually, with the Garden Communities plan to actually put right all the wrongs over the years of development. When you look at the sustainable objectives here, when you look at them, whether they be health generated, regeneration generated, or transport generated, and in the right locations, I mean, it gives us a great opportunity to actually show what development should look like and the opportunities that they should provide to people who are living in those areas and benefit from those outcomes. So I think it's quite an exciting time to see those garden communities actually come to fruition.
And let me just say you're absolutely right, Ivan, which is not something I say often, but you've absolutely got what garden communities is about, and it's why I'm so passionate about it, because it is the way we should be doing development, especially the big stuff. It's about infrastructure first. You know, I've said repeatedly that the first building that I want to see go up on that site isn't one of 1,000 identikit Barratt homes. The first building I want to see go up is the new school or the new doctor's surgery. Before the community's even gone in there, I want us to be having infrastructure going in first, and that's what it's all about. And it's difficult and it's challenging, and it's meant a lot of us as politicians have had to leave our party politics at the door and get around the table for the greater good, because we can really see the prize and it's really worth going for. And it has meant we've got a local plan where we have been able to say, OK, because we're doing that, we don't have to impose huge housing numbers on people that clearly don't want it in unsustainable locations where they won't get those benefits. So on that really positive note, go on, Ivan.
You know, just finally, but you know, it's down on paper that we need to implement what we're saying we're going to do, because we can't keep building developments and relying on keep building roads to, you know, we can't keep investing in roads. We've got to make sure those developments actually offer the alternative to continual sort of car use and the continual cost on road congestion. So it must make sure that there is provision in there to cater for public transport, yes, car ownership, yes, cycling, yes, pedestrianisation. All of those things are really important, and I don't think we should actually take our focus away from that.
Right. Okay, I'm going to go to the vote. It's been moved as amended. It's been seconded. All those in favour, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much.
Right, we've only got another 1,000 pages to go.
There's a next meeting. Next time we meet is 10th of August. We've got a cabinet meeting tomorrow morning just to hopefully endorse this, and then a full council meeting on Thursday where we further discuss it. And I will see you all at those respective meetings. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. See you next time.